Welcome everyone to the weekly crypto recap show where we go over all of the latest news from the week in crypto. I have on the show with me today Chris Karabats, aka Zaphoid from SmartCash. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey Naomi, thanks for having me this week again. It's been an interesting week so far.
It's always interesting. I think that the biggest standout for me, although it's not directly crypto related, but is because of WikiLeaks, tight involvement with cryptocurrency over the years. I just want to mention right off the bat what's going on with Assange. So it's not surprising at all, but he's facing 17 new charges, all about like espionage, and I mean it's crazy what's going on. It seems like a direct attack on free speech and on freedom of the press. It's just this really, really important thing that I think we do need to cover right off the bat here on the show. So do you want to kind of talk us through the charges, the 17 new counts that he's facing, and let's just discuss that for a little bit.
Yep. So he was indicted on violating 17 counts of the Espionage Act. And just from the start here, I'm going to say that all 17 are basically what any journalist with a confidential source does any day. Even the New York Times says, quote, much of what he does at WikiLeaks is difficult to distinguish in a legally meaningful way from what traditional news organizations do, end quote. So even the New York Times is going, hey, this seems a little bit too much here. So it's quite insane what they're doing. I mean, this is stuff that the Obama administration refused to charge him for because they didn't think they could win. And they did think that it would be too much of a overstatement of the First Amendment, of the First Amendment freedom of speech. So to sum it up, Julian received secret and or top secret information and then published it, which is what several news organizations have done over the years. Several of the great news organization leaks that we've talked about over the last century have come in just this way. And this is very frightening from a freedom of speech perspective. And you can read through the indictment PDF and talks about several things about how we received this information, how we encouraged people to give him information, how he have had his site put the most wanted for their leaks and things like that. And all this is listed in the indictment as if it's somehow criminally relevant, when in fact, it is just what any journalist who's trying to get information out to the public would do. And since there is no certification for journalists, there's nothing limiting or defining what a journalist is in the Constitution or in the First Amendment, or really in any morally significant way. There's nothing to say that CNN or New York Times has a right to do this, but Julian Assange doesn't. And that's kind of the biggest thing here. Though they have tried to make that difference. If you remember when the Hillary Clinton emails were coming out and CNN said, hey, nobody should read this stuff. Only responsible news organizations like us should review this and then pass it on to you carefully. And that's how CNN was trying to say that they're somehow privileged in a First Amendment way versus normal individual people.
There was this article, so the New York Times wrote about it, and I'm generally not a big fan of the New York Times, but I mean, at least they were recognizing in this that this is a huge attack on freedom of press, and they kind of reiterated in this article a lot, saying like, this is really no different from what we're doing when we're publishing information. Like they kind of said this multiple times in their article that came out the other day. So it is, it's a scary thing that's going on right now, and Julian Assange's, his persona or how he's been portrayed in the media has kind of shifted so much depending on what government narrative they want to get out there, and New York Times kind of succinctly goes through this, and it says that, where is it here? So it's like I can't find it, but it's kind of like he's a journalist, and oh no, he's not a journalist, he's a spy from Russia, oh no, he's a sex criminal from Europe, oh no, he's like a kind of, now he's this hacker who is stealing passwords, and he's, if you actually look, and we've covered this at length on the show before, Chris, and talked about the reasons why the Obama administration never pursued this, because there's no evidence, first of all, that he did help get a password or anything. But what they're actually saying in these indictments and these charges are, he encouraged Manning. He said,
Yeah.
oh, do you have more information you could send me? And when Manning's like, oh, probably not. He's like, oh, well, if you do, I'd love it. Please keep looking. It's important. And this is basically the role of a journalist. This is what journalists do for a living. They find sources, they protect their sources, they release information. And the government really doesn't like this because this was information against the government. This was about war crimes. This was about people being held in Guantanamo Bay without warrants. This is about, bad things that the government really doesn't want people finding out about. And so obviously now they're going after him. And it's just, it's really scary what this will do in terms of precedents, and not just precedents, but this in itself. Like, even if this is the only thing that happened, this is a tragedy. This is not, this is terrifying.
Yeah, as Jamil Jaffer of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University said, the charges rely almost entirely on conduct that investigative journalists engage in every day. The indictment should be understood as a frontal attack on press freedom.
The whole thing, it's just, that's exactly what it is. And I know that the crypto community is often very favorable towards Assange, although you can't generalize an entire community. But knowing WikiLeaks' roots and sort of the first bull run coming out of WikiLeaks accepting crypto donations, and there's a kind of a tight history there, but also it's about freedom of choices, it's about freedom of speech, it's about not being under the hand of government. And I know we talked before about, what's his name? Bill Sherman. Is that his name? Is Bill? No. What's his, Brad. The congressman who was saying that he wants to ban crypto, and we talked about that as well in the last episode. I'll mention it later on because there are some other things that it relates to. But basically, this congressman who's saying crypto gives people a huge amount of freedom, and it doesn't allow the American government to, pressure other countries to do things that they want it to do. This is bad. That's why crypto's bad. And everyone in the crypto space is going, I agree with you 100% here on the outcomes, but we're coming at this from a very different perspective. That's why we like crypto. So it's
more that, it's more that, the crypto people are saying, this is what we've been telling people for years and been called crazy for saying. Not just, we agree with you, but this is our conspiracy theory, and everybody calls us crazy for saying this. And Brad Sherman of California, favorite California, the what is it, the USS California, basically they are quite communist there.
Well, California, the bastion of freedoms, as we like to call it, that wonderfully
nobody ever calls California that. not since they were a state, I want to say. But,
it's the opposite of all freedom.
But basically he wants to ban Bitcoin because the threat they pose to U.S. international financial power. And this attack on Bitcoin, whether or not anybody in the Congress will actually go along with what Brad said. And as an aside, I'm pretty sure that what Brad said here was how things were explained to him, and he probably forgot the part where they said, don't say any of this publicly.
It's there's footnotes, these are the reasons why we've got to keep it secret. Top secret stuff, you don't talk about American leverage, and then he's I would like to talk about American leverage, and the tools needed to use that. So it's just crazy. So I just wanted to mention the Assange thing right off the bat because that is breaking at the moment, and we'll definitely be updating you on everything that goes on there. But just reading through, I'll post the link to the actual documents here. It's United States of America versus Julian Paul Assange, and 17 new counts. It's just terrifying, and we'll keep you posted. But let's sorry, go ahead.
Hold on. One of my favorite lines from C17, page 6 of the document. Manning did not have administrative level privileges and used special software, namely a Linux operating system, to access the computer file and obtain the portion of the path.
Special tools Linux. Whoa.
I'm sorry, maybe nobody else finds this hilarious, but I think that's just a hilarious way to put it. And this right here, this section C, is the only thing that might even be approaching a crime, because they didn't actually say, because in 18, right after they said that had Manning retrieved the full password hash and had Assange and Manning successfully cracked it, maybe he could have done these bad things. but they didn't. Like, he didn't do anything of the sort. Everything else is just stuff Manning had access to and gave to Assange. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on, but we will rail against this later on. So I want to talk about generally the world. I think it's coming to a fore now. The response of different governments around the world to crypto. I'm just seeing so many patterns in the media. More and more, I'm seeing governments starting to take like a heavier hand. This is a pattern that it's not looking too good for crypto, I have to say. And maybe I'm just paranoid or something, probably. But I want to go through some of these things that have come out in the news in the last week of the government's responses to cryptocurrencies. So we mentioned before, Japan scrutinizing crypto exchanges ahead of G20 summit. So we've talked before about how Japan kind of wants this global consensus of how governments deal with cryptocurrency, which is this interesting thing. Yang actually said a similar thing when he was speaking at Consensus the other week, and he was saying, oh, it's annoying how in America you got all these different states with their different ways of dealing with cryptocurrency, and that's bad. We just want kind of a cohesive regulation about this. And at first you might think, oh, that sounds good, it'd be easier for businesses. They don't have like one license to worry about rather than 50 different ones depending on the state. Then you've got to think like, well, which states are they going to follow in terms of guidance? Because Wyoming has very different rules at the moment to New York, and they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, do we really want to take the risk of having politicians implement New York level regulation across the whole of America when no longer anyone has any choice of place? Like, at least now you can say, okay, well, I'll just go to Wyoming. I'm not going to offer these services to New York customers. It's sad that we'd have to do that, but we're going to do this because it's too difficult. What if America made it that difficult for the entirety of the country? That isn't something that's definitely not a good thing there. So I'm very much against this idea that Japan's putting forward of having this kind of cohesive regulation. I think that would be terrible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And with how these things go, that it's not like they pick Wyoming to follow. I mean, everything worldwide would be most likely to be modeled after New York, or even worse than New York.
Yeah.
And that's the way they would go, because they want to maintain control over it. Japan themselves has been quite a mixed bag as far as crypto goes. They've been quite hard on a lot of their exchanges, requiring some licensing, but also as far as businesses accepting, they've been pretty easygoing on that. So Japan itself is quite a mixed bag of crypto friendliness, but this latest statement of wanting the grand unifying law to regulate crypto worldwide under, just that is the opposite of the decentralization we're going for in crypto.
Right. And they've talked previously about, tightening regulations, proposing measures so that governments could more effectively supervise cryptocurrency transactions. They really want to know everything that's going on. This is definitely in line with the pattern that we saw with the head of OFAC and FinCEN, the person who oversees that, who spoke at Consensus. She just came down hard in her her speech, saying like, this is cryptocurrency. We're going after all of them. We're supervising everything. It's kind of like this terrifying speech, and everyone in the audience is like, cool. Like, it was awkward and just kind of very threatening, the whole tone. So that's Japan. Then we've got I want to move on to let's go to another kind of similar one. Okay, LocalBitcoins bans Bitcoin buying in Iran. Iran, they've seen like a sharp rise in cryptocurrency usage, and then LocalBitcoins has just banned usage there. I presume, like, they haven't released an official statement about why, but I presume that it's because of sanctions in Iraq. So again, they're towing the government line for America, and so now they're making sure that crypto isn't a way that people can circumvent these government rules.
Yeah, and that's just why we need more decentralized exchanges, atomic swaps, and things like that, so governments can't hammer down on one single entity like LocalBitcoins, even as decentralized and non-custodial they might be.
Yeah, and so that's Iran. Then you've got the EU authorities. They shut down Bitcoin transaction mixer. So mixing services, as you know, they are helpful for helping maintain privacy. You jumble everything together, and they don't really. It's harder to tell who owns what and to kind of follow transactions. From transaction to transaction. So they've seized, Europol has seized bestmixer.io, and this is it kind of shows the fear that governments have. Like, they don't want anything being obfuscated. They don't want things being hidden. And so now that they're going after centralized mixers is very interesting. And as you said, like, hopefully we'll get more decentralized exchanges coming out of this. Perhaps we'll get more tools that can't be shut down, that don't have these location-specific servers that can be seized.
And with mixers, I mean, Europol in this case said that the mixer was probably used to conceal or launder criminal flows of money. Like, probably, but at a wider level, I mean, mixers are a horrible security. Mixing, even things like the Dash mixing, you can track down at least half the time relatively straightforwardly. And I'm sure that the high-powered systems they have here, that places like Australia are using, can track it down much better than I could just by flipping through the transactions. And that's why having optional security basically ends up, instead of giving you privacy, ends up just tainting the coins that go through these and resulting in actually losing the fungibility of Bitcoin, because the coins then are forever tainted from going through a mixer. So that's why you need, some currencies that do have always on privacy.
Right. That is, and that's definitely something that I do like about Monero, that their default is privacy. I think that's a great move, because you want as many people in using the privacy features as possible, because the set of people, if you have a larger set of people using the privacy features, then it's going to be harder to track things down. So they've banned mixers, it seems. They're really, they haven't said that there's a ban, but they've seized a site and said, like, there's a bad, probably, we don't know, but we don't like them, and that gives us a right to seize them. So that's happening there. But then at the same time, you have the EU central bank, who apparently says cryptocurrencies pose no threat to financial stability. So that's very I don't know what to say about that. That's very brazen of them. I don't know. That's very optimistic, naive of them. But I don't know whether that's just bravado speaking, and they're just pretending like, oh, we're not worried at all. Who cares about crypto? Because clearly the actions of these governments around the world, it speaks more loudly than these statements that people issue. It does seem that people are feeling threatened, that they're starting to see the power that this tool could have.
Well, the ECB is not, well, the ECB has a lot of bigger problems than cryptocurrency right now. So I wouldn't worry about that so much, simply because, yeah, sure, they want to say this, but it just follows in line to them saying, everything's okay. Please ignore the fact that we're, flatlining our interest rates and we're resuming quantitative easing. Everything's
Pay
fine.
no attention to the man behind the curtain. We've seen the man behind the curtain. We don't like him. That's why we're going over here and using this crypto thing, because, this whole negative interest rate thing is going to screw us all. So, yeah, that's going on with Europe's central bank at the moment. And then again, you have an Israeli court. They ruled that Bitcoin is an asset, which basically means that there's this one trader that they're saying is subject to capital gains because crypto isn't money, they ruled. Despite whether or not you've been using it as money, that's irrelevant, because the courts ruled that it's subject to capital gains and an asset, not a money. So lots of things like this are happening all over the world. In America, they can't decide what it is. Different departments are regulating it as different things. Maybe one day we'll get some sort of a cohesive understanding of what this new tech is, but not before the government tries to kind of destroy it in the interim. But so right now, you've the Israeli court ruled this. This apparently came out on Tuesday that they announced this. And it's involving a blockchain startup founder, Noam Kopel of DAV Network. And this is, again, we're talking about his actions from 2011 to 2013. So the governments around the world I mean, it's not like in these early days but there was any kind of safe harbor. People presumed at the time, they're like, oh, it's this kind of fringe thing. People were playing around with it. No one had heard of it. 2011, no one had heard of this stuff. And now governments are going back through these records and finding these people who were involved in cryptocurrency and cracking down on them. And saying, you know, there was no safe harbor, you're subject to all of these things, even though we didn't realize what it was at the time. Now we do, and in hindsight, we're retroactively punishing you for getting involved with this thing that has morphed over time. And, you know, it's just kind of terrifying that the governments are going back to the early stages. And, you know, are they going to go after Laszlo Hanyecz and say, well, you sold this Bitcoin for pizza. You spent a lot of money on pizza. It doesn't matter that at the time, you know, like, I mean, it just, I don't know, it's a little scary.
Yeah, but that's what we've seen the Australian government do. We're going to see various others do this as they develop their tools for monitoring the blockchain and for tracking down the optional privacy that comes with mixing or whatever like that. So it's not surprising that the government would go, hey, you made some money, where's our cut?
But the government wanting a cut of other people's private property, that's so out of the ordinary. So we've got Israel there, you mentioned Australia, so let's talk about Australia. Oh my God, Australia, what are you doing? So there's this 33-year-old in Australia, and he's been charged after he was caught mining cryptocurrency at work. So you think, okay, so he was using resources of his company, maybe they slap him with some sort of fine or something. Like, he's mining crypto on a computer. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but surely it would be up to the work to decide, you know, what happens there and all this. So if we actually look, and so the mined cryptocurrency worth over $6,000 for his own gain, it says. So $6,000, he mined $6,000 worth of crypto, right? And the charges that have been laid against him, they're thinking like slap on the wrist, a bit of a fine, something. So the charges carry a maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment and 2 years imprisonment respectively for the different charges here. So like, there's a jail sentence apparently associated with this. And so the response from the government, they say Australian taxpayers put their trust in public officials to perform vital roles for our community with the utmost integrity. Any alleged criminal conduct which betrays this trust for personal gain will be investigated and prosecuted. I mean, this is craziness. This is craziness. He's mining cryptocurrency on a computer. You'd think, oh, well, electricity costs or something. Maybe he pays the difference of whatever it costs the employee, or maybe he, you know, pays the amount that he was, like, maybe when he was meant to be working. It's not like crypto mining is an active thing. It's just running the background. So it doesn't necessarily mean that his productivity was any less, but maybe a bit of a fine. But this is craziness, and talking about how the community sees the tax officials as performing this vital role with the utmost integrity. What planet are they living on? No one looks at a tax official like that. It's like, yes, I have respect for you. Please go steal more money. Like, I'm having a lot of trouble processing this.
It seems, you know, they're charging him with unauthorized modification of data to cause impairment and unauthorized modification of restricted data. I mean, okay, he's a government contractor, fire him. Like, you know, maybe, you know, subtract from his fees any of the financial harm done there, but jail time for this seems way over the top. But then again, it's the government. You screw with them and they'll come down on you hard. Absolutely.
And it does seem that Australia is being harsher than most. I mean, in America, you have different states that are, like Wyoming, as we've mentioned, seems very favorable. There's another bill that just passed in Montana we'll talk about in a second that also seems favorable. So there are places in America. Australia, it just seems like they're like, no, we are going after you. Like, you can't share videos. You'll be put in jail for 14 years. You can't mine cryptocurrency. You'll be put in jail for 10 years. Like, it's draconian and it's terrifying. I have, like, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's government going, you know, I don't care if you steal from another business, you screw with us and we'll put the boot down on you.
we had people trying to put, like in Iran, LocalBitcoins shut down because of sanctions in Iran. So it does seem like crypto is a tool for countries avoiding sanctions, which is interesting because it helps kind of distribute that power a little more. But it apparently, they're like Venezuela. People are saying that they're trying to avoid US sanctions by trading in rubles and crypto. And that's a big thing that people are talking about at the moment. So, like, America is really, they come down hard. When they have sanctions, they want everyone around the world to comply. It doesn't matter whether they agree or not. They're just like, nope, we've decided, you all have to toe the line. And so crypto, again, it just does seem that it's providing a workaround for some of these countries.
Well, that is what Congress critter Brad said would happen. So, he was right. No, I mean, again, it's not like I'm sitting here going that I love the governments of Venezuela and Russia, but the simple fact is, I mean, the U.S. has been pushing everybody else around using the dollar as a lever to do that, and it's inevitable that they would try to look for other things. I mean, for years, China has been talking about using some gold-backed currency for trade instead of the dollar. Russia, but I mean, these are not necessarily huge fans of the U.S. It's just that crypto is proving to be a somewhat useful tool in this case. And I thought it was interesting they're doing this, and expected that they're doing this, because as the U.S. becomes weaker through our trade spats with China and the rest of the world, and whatever it is we're doing now, as the dollar becomes more and more obvious a means to control the rest of the world, as Brad out and out said, that this will just keep happening. And Venezuela has very little choice right now in what they do. They have to take some action to try to get more resources in for their citizens. I mean, it's inevitable. They have to. Whether they can actually save their government or not is another story. I'm somewhat surprised that it's actually lasted this long there, considering how totalitarian Venezuela is.
Right.
But Russia wants to stick a finger in our eye, and Venezuela is desperate, so it's not surprising that they're trying to do this. This article does call the Petro El Petro with a capital L, which I thought was interesting. I've never heard it referred to that way before, but whatever. Maybe it was just a weird copy-paste translation thing.
Maybe. Sorry, what were you going to say?
But the interesting thing about the last of this article is talking about that there are no open crypto exchanges and no real way to pay with crypto in Venezuela. So before we celebrate this as a victory for crypto too much, remember that the government of Venezuela is hammering down on crypto exchanges and on private transactions using any crypto other than their own.
Absolutely.
Because,
and they sorry.
No, but there is still a government wanting to control what money can do in their borders.
Absolutely. And in the past, I mean, they've cracked down on areas where they've seen an abnormal use of electricity. They've persecuted miners, put a lot of people in jail. So this is not a country that is favorable to cryptocurrency at all. So it's interesting because at the same time that they are using crypto to gain more freedom, economic freedom, they're persecuting the individuals who are using it for the same reasons. So it's not a good government there. I want to move on to something a little bit happier. We'd mentioned Montana earlier. So they've just passed a bill that exempts utility tokens from securities laws. This is kind of going down the same path that Wyoming was going down, and it's really exciting. I mean, I love seeing more states get on board with this type of legislation. So earlier this month, this bill was put into law, and so it's called, the title is called Generally Revised Laws Relating to Cryptocurrency, which sounds kind of interesting. So they're kind of looking at crypto in general. But it was the governor of the state of Montana, Steve Bullock, signed this bill in. And yeah, it seems promising. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
It's nice to have some sort of at least local regulatory clarity for the million or so people living in Montana. And one of the things we have to be careful about this is that, the issuer must not market the token as an investment for speculation. Cool. We all basically do that. If you talk about your thing as a speculative item, then yeah, they're going to come down on you. and they must still file a notice of intent to sell the tokens with the state security commissioner. So it's not like a free and clear to do whatever you want. You do have to follow the regulations, issue a statement that you're going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. It's not what I would call perfect, but it's better than nothing, I would say. And it is nice that this was actually signed by the governor, because so many of the other ones we're reading are just, oh, they just passed the House, or oh, they just passed the Senate of whatever state we're talking about, but they weren't actually into law yet. So it's nice this one actually made it all the way through the process and has been signed into law.
Yeah, and then it's talking about this consumptive purpose. So that's another restriction on this. The utility token must be available within 180 days after its time of sale or transfer, and the initial buyer is barred from reselling or transferring the token until its consumptive purpose has become available. So that's interesting as well. It's not quite clear to me what that entails. It seems kind of vaguely worded, but they're talking about a consumptive purpose. It's being defined as providing or receiving goods, services, or content, including access to goods, services, or content. So, I mean, it's not really a law for all tokens, it seems. It seems like it's very specific. Seems like a step in the right direction, though, but we'll have to see what happens with this.
Absolutely, and there won't be any, year or 2 year long ICOs with this, with no product to show. You actually have to produce something within half a year to qualify for this, which from my perspective is a good thing, because I thought there were too many vaporware ICOs over the last couple of years. But at the same time, I don't think the government should force this.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
And then talking about government clarity. So that's another thing. The IRS says it will soon issue crypto tax guidance. And this is the first time that it will have done so since 2014, which was a long time ago to go without any sort of guidance as things change in this, space that moves at lightning speed. So apparently IRS, they're working on tax guidance, which is great, because in the interim, they're going after all of these people retroactively who've apparently broken all these laws, but we're not really sure whether these laws are in place, because everything's just a little bit murky with tax. And if you ask any crypto person, how they're dealing with their taxes, they're all like, I don't know how to, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, I do everything that I think is right, but, it's just not clear what people are meant to do, and yet the government's still cracking down hard on people. So I'm happy that the IRS is coming out with some sort of guidance. Clarity is always better than obfuscating what this thing is. They're also working on guidance for acceptable methods for calculating cost basis, acceptable methods of cost basis assignment, tax treatment of forks, which is an interesting one, because if we're talking about things that you don't have a choice, like you have Bitcoin and then it forks and suddenly you've got two different coins, and that new coin is worth a certain amount, and so that adds to your portfolio, but you had no choice, you didn't buy it, there was no active participation in all of this, and yet you're going to be treated like this was some sort of active action on your behalf. It's just, it's so crazy, like talking about all of this and just trying to shoehorn this new tech into this archaic financial infrastructure that it doesn't fit into. I'm interested to see what happens with all of this, but I'm not that excited, because I'm not sure it's going to be good.
I'm frightened, because it could definitely affect me quite drastically if they screw with some things retroactively, which they will.
Yeah, because you've got a whole bunch of people who sold a shitcoin or something, and then they weren't thinking about taxes that were applicable to that, because this is just a thing that it's almost like it got airdropped into their wallet, and so they're not thinking, okay, so how much will I owe the government for getting rid of this, or what if they got airdropped and then they lost the keys, or there are all kinds of things that happen, and it's just people have been completely screwed over by these tax rules. There have been people who have made a huge amount of money on paper, but in reality what's ended up happening, if they didn't cash out their gains or whatever, they don't have the resources to pay the taxes that they apparently owe on paper. It's just like a lot of people getting hurt by this.
And not just that, but they talk about cost basis assignment. That's basically last in, first out, or specific itemization. And depending on what you did and how much work you went through, one of these might be a heck of a lot better than another one, if you're an active trader or if you're a long-term holder or a mixture of both. And if they suddenly retroactively decide that all you people who filed as last in, first out suddenly need to file as first in, first out, that will drastically change their tax bill. And retroactively, because again, the IRS will do this retroactively, because they always do. And it's going to cause some serious heartburn for people who did try to go through the effort of doing everything properly and and filing their taxes, because they didn't want the IRS to come breathing down their necks later on. So it'll be interesting. It's past due, but it's probably not going to be good.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be good. So let's move on to some other things. So just one last thing. So Russian central bank is apparently considering gold-backed cryptocurrency. Again, this is just a trend that we're seeing, that governments are realizing that a digital currency is the future, and they're kind of exploring different ways to implement this. Whether or not we agree with having things backed by other things is another issue, but it just kind of it underlines this trend that we're seeing of different governments that are recognizing that blockchain tech is probably something that's going to be integrated with whatever fiat system they're using or whatever. It's interesting that the Russian central bank is considering gold-backed cryptocurrency. Like, is this going to, is the ruble suddenly going to have some sort of stability? Like, can we trust the government to actually have gold there backing it up when they issue whatever these ruble tokens are? It's just kind of an interesting. It's like when Venezuela issued the petro, right? And we're like, it's backed by oil. Is it though? Is it really backed by oil? So I'm not sure that we can necessarily trust these governments who are saying this stuff, but it is interesting that everyone's kind of moving in this general direction, and at the same time as governments are exploring blockchain tech, they're also cracking down on individuals who use this tech.
Yeah, and it's not coincidental that this is happening among countries that are not particularly friendly to the United States. This is just more down the line of, it's going to be an interesting next decade as more and more countries decide they do not like the United States dollar being the world reserve currency.
Yeah.
And I agree with you completely. I would not trust the Russian government to have gold back there any more than I trust the Venezuelan government for having a oil-based crypto. They've already adjusted the value of the petro 3, maybe 4 times relation to oil, even though they said that would never happen. And it's obvious that governments cannot dehook themselves from the addictiveness of inflationary currencies.
For sure. So Logan from Anthem Goals is saying, how can he get on the show? Logan, you want to come on the show and talk about crypto news? You're welcome anytime. So please do. He's looking through Facebook at the moment. I'm watching all of the chats right now. I've got the YouTube. I've got the Bitbacker. I've got the DTube. I've got Twitch. I've got Facebook. Why am I on all these shitty platforms? Because there aren't, that many good platforms that are linked into Restream, although I am trying to use as many of them as I possibly can. And actually, I have an exciting announcement on streaming opportunities in relation to Bitbacker and the evolution of that site. So maybe I'll announce that a little bit later. But thank you to everyone who, on whatever platform you're looking through. Appreciate you being here. And I do just want to, before we move on, so I didn't mention it, but I did get a wonderful super chat from Uvis. Thank you so much. He sent me dirty fiat. But I still appreciate it so much, Uvis. I really thank you for that. He says, have some slave money to support your show. I appreciate that slave money, Uvis. Thank you so much. Always wonderful having you guys here. Let's move on to this interesting thing. It's a little bit more fun and interesting. I'm sure that you've all been watching as Craig Wright files for copyright of the Bitcoin white paper, and everyone in the community is like, what? So he, CoinGeek issues this article where they say that, this is the first government office to recognize Craig as the author of these papers. And it's like, whoa, that's the biggest spin I've ever seen. Like, that's bigger than, Justin Sun level spin. And it's fascinating that the US Copyright Office actually issued a statement in response to this. This isn't often that they do stuff like this, but they literally clarified and says, as a general rule, when the Copyright Office receives an application for registration, the claimant certifies as to the truth of the statements made in the submitted materials. The Copyright Office does not investigate the truth of any statements made. In a case in which a work is registered under a pseudonym, the Copyright Office does not investigate whether there is a provable connection between the claimant and the pseudonymous author. So they're dispelling this notion that they recognized anything. And it just kind of just throws a lot of mud on Craig's face right now, because you're wondering, like, wow, he's going to all of these crazy extents to try and prove his ownership without doing the one thing that would prove his ownership, which would be to sign a message with his private key. So it's just kind of this crazy facade that obviously to the unacquainted it's probably very convincing, but to anyone who knows anything about this stuff, we're just watching going, this gets more and more ludicrous as we go on.
It is quite entertaining, and entertainingly enough, Bitcoin SV sure pumped up price-wise as soon as this happened. So, from a couple of weeks ago, was it like $59, peaked somewhere around 118, and now it's floating around the $100 point. So if you still have some BSV, now might be your last chance to dump it before it drops down forever, but you never know. You never know.
Before it drops down forever. It's kind of funny that they issued this statement in response, and I just this whole facade is it just gets so tiring. So I don't want to spend too much more time on it. I just want to mention it because I think it's interesting, and I think that it's just it's a really silly move by him. I don't know. I just don't think it's going to end up.
It's in character though, so whatever.
Whatever, it is in character. So talking more about privacy and government crackdowns and sort of the response in the crypto community to this sort of thing, there are a couple of things going on in the community right now with different platforms looking to make things more private or building products to aid privacy. So Vitalik, he proposed a mixer, a one-off mixer to anonymize Ethereum transactions. So that's interesting that now he's talking about adding more steps towards privacy on the network. What are your thoughts on this, Chris?
I mean, as I said earlier, mixers are not privacy. They're just obfuscation, which we all know the government has enough resources to get through, and they actually reduce the fungibility of tokens because you can always track down coins that have gone through a mixer. So now those coins may be blacklisted by the various blacklists that are going on around out there. So it's not surprising that more people are doing it because it is an easy way to add some additional layer of obfuscation to tracking down ownership of tokens. But I wouldn't trust it to protect you against the government in any way whatsoever.
Right. And when he's talking about smart contracts on Ethereum that would allow people to opt in to this added privacy. And he was explaining in this interview with CoinDesk, he said that, the anonymity set, as you said, it's kind of the group of users that this money could have come from. And although, Buterin explains that the bigger the anonymity set, the more privacy you have. But as you mentioned, Chris, the government has enough resources to wade through all of this. So at the same time, I agree with Vitalik, and it does seem like maybe we need more steps towards this. I mean, if every cryptocurrency around the world had something similar, that's a huge amount of effort for the government to go to, a huge amount of resources to go through to pull it all apart and do data analysis and figure out where everything's coming from. So maybe we just do need kind of default privacy on everything that we're doing.
I agree with the right to default privacy. There are certainly reasons where you might not want it because of the added overhead it adds, or just I want to be able to use my coin in a jurisdiction that's going to get down on me for using a privacy coin, so I won't use one. But at the same time, I believe it's every individual's right to have privacy when they want it. You don't have to prove the need for privacy. It's one of those things like, oh, if you didn't do anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. Well, we all know the response to that. So it is every human's right to privacy. And there are certainly legitimate use cases for privacy. It's just the government thinks that it's the exception to every rule and should be able to see everything that's going on when they do not have that right. We have the right to be private from everybody we want to be private from. If we screw it up, that's our own fault, but that doesn't mean we don't have the right to it if we take it.
Absolutely. And that's not the only project that's kind of looking into this right now. So Boost VC, which is run by Adam Draper, which is Tim Draper's son. He has just invested in a decentralized domain registry, put $4 million into that. I really like the idea of that because right now, I mean, internet websites is kind of this very centralized system right now, and everything needs to be very open, and like your private information is kind of out there. We have kind of workarounds for people who don't want their home address on the internet and things like that. But like having a decentralized registry for this type of thing could be a really interesting step towards more internet privacy.
I agree. I think that we need to add more decentralization to the internet because we've already seen what happens when overly centralized. You have sites like Gab that get the domain taken away, or other domains just get taken away because they said something that they don't like, or somebody used the platform to say something that those in power don't like. So it's very important that we add some additional services that way. And it's interesting how it's built on around Zilqua, which I haven't seen used for this sort of thing before. So I'm gonna need to read a bit more about exactly how they're doing this. And they're also talking about using IPFS, or interplanetary file system, for storage of the websites and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting what they're trying to do here. We'll see how usable or resilient it is. I'm a little bit taken aback by their talking about offering 2 levels of domains, a .zil basic domain and a premium domain for $250, whatever that means. So I'm a little bit taken aback by that, but at the same time, if they're trying to offer a commercial project like that, fine. I just don't know how decentralized it really is if they're able to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll have to see how that plays out, and a lot of these companies out there that throw around the word decentralized, and you got to take it with a grain of salt, because apparently there are levels of decentralization and there are these hybrids, and don't just presume that because they've got it in their title that it's an accurate description of the company. Some things to do with crypto adoption. So we've talked about BitPay on the show before, and what they're doing, like mainly I would say overwhelmingly with businesses to kind of increase merchant adoption. So apparently they've just teamed with AT&T. So now you can pay your bills with AT&T in crypto via BitPay, which is interesting. And I appreciate these third-party services so much that do things like this. And a lot of people they look down on any third-party organization because they're like, oh, it's very centralized and it's against crypto. Well, actually, it's helping companies work with this very new tech, where they otherwise wouldn't have, by providing easier on-ramps, etc. So I think this sounds exciting. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, I mean, BitPay is making big moves in the space. I mean, BitPay is what Ohio is using to accept Bitcoin for taxes now, and I think pretty sure they're spreading around a couple other governments as well. So it makes sense that they team up with AT&T over this. Some people agree. I agree that some people think that it's bad to have a centralized company sitting between you and who you're trying to pay. Doesn't that break peer-to-peer? But at the same time, not everybody will accept crypto right now, and giving people more ability to spend Bitcoin or other crypto increases its usability and can increase its adoption. Because when people ask, well, what can I buy with this? We say, well, you can pay your AT&T bill with this. It doesn't matter if AT&T never holds crypto or not. If it gets sold to fiat on the way out there, it's still more ways that people can use their cryptocurrency. Now, I agree it would be better if AT&T accepted it directly, and maybe in time, as more and more people use this to do it, AT&T will look like, well, why are we paying these extra fees? Let's just accept it directly and either hold some and figure out what to do there, like Overstock did. But I say it's mostly a good thing. I mean, it's what we at SmartCash are trying to do too, is just make it easier for people to spend cryptocurrency wherever they are, no matter who they're dealing with. So, BitPay, you could have issues with them. I'm not going to argue with anybody about that. But having more places that more people can use cryptocurrency for real world things is a good thing, even if it's not a perfect thing.
Absolutely. And then we've got this interesting thing. So Fortnite Maker teams up with people in the blockchain basically to boost crypto game development. And it's kind of like, I love seeing popular things like Fortnite and the teams behind those starting to delve into the world of blockchain. And so Mike Gamble, which is the head of games licensing for Epic Games obviously are there behind Fortnite, which is probably the most popular game right now. Is that accurate, Chris?
I'd have to look into that. I haven't paid attention to games much recently, but it is certainly up there.
Certainly up there. Well, he says that we're delighted that the Abyss has chosen to provide additional resources to Unreal Engine developers and publishers on this platform. Unreal Engine 4 scales to hundreds of millions of players, and access to premier support and connections with the global community can be critical to success of larger scale games with live operations. So they're kind of leveraging like the blockchain world and trying to bring more developers into the space there. And again, if this leads to more adoption of people, like we saw, and I'll mention, actually this is a good segue into that, like you saw PewDiePie helping bring people into the world of crypto, people who've never been interested in it, people who aren't really looking at it, but he switched over to DLive with an exclusive contract so that all of his live streams are through DLive now. And the platform has since, and this is a blockchain based platform, I'm on there, I just posted my link in there, and if I get 200 followers there, I get like some sort of status on there. I don't really know, but they tell me I need 200 followers before I can like use the site fully. So if you're on DLive, please go there. But apparently the site has seen a 67% growth in its user base since he moved over there. So he's the most popular YouTuber, and he's really slowly breaking away from relying on YouTube. And I think that's because YouTube has treated him pretty badly. They do like this rewind special every year where they talk about like, oh, the best things that happened in YouTube, and kind of do this mashup. And he didn't make it into the one from last year. And it's like, he's the most popular person on your channel. You didn't put him in there. So there's something going on there. So he's broken away. He's got this live contract, exclusive contract with DLive. But it is interesting to see more people going over to blockchain resources. They're on the Lino network, and so the co-founder of the Lino network says that he thinks that the lack of transparency and the huge cut that platforms take from content creators, which is true, are the two biggest problems the online streaming industry has, and blockchain is the perfect technology to solve both problems. Yeah, I think that's great if you can let content creators know that Google doesn't have to take 30% of everything you get sent. Then they're going to start looking at these other options.
Absolutely. I whatever you think about any of these individual platforms, I think having more competition in the space is unambiguously good, and having the ability for users to actually give more value directly to the content producer versus having, Google take 30% or whatever it does. It seems like a good thing as well. And then also we've talked about censorship before, and how YouTube and Twitter and whatnot are censoring viewpoints they don't like. And we're probably going to see a lot more of that coming up here over the next couple of years, and how crypto, as we in the crypto space start to get more and more outside the norm and disapproved by the official people, we're probably going to start getting kicked off these platforms too. So having more platforms is a great way. And just like you're doing with Restream, being able to essentially decentralize your stream by spreading it to all these sources. Whatever you think of any one individual source, it's not likely that all of them are going to be able to kick you off at the same time.
Well, I don't know. Things have been pretty coordinated. I mean, it's been crazy what's happened in a lot of spaces where suddenly across a bunch of platforms you disappear. So that's why I put I give a lot more credibility to blockchain platforms than a lot of other people do, because I see them as having more longevity for content creators that may have differing opinions or may not be liked by payment processors who would leverage a lot of these platforms. So I try to put all my videos on things like BitChute, I love, Steemit, I post everything on Minds.com, Memo.cash. I mean, there are a bunch of interesting things out there that I think people should be exploring. It doesn't take long to just post it on these platforms. It's quick just to post it up. I would encourage everyone to be starting to build a community on all of these different platforms, and just hedge your bets, because this is not a free speech world that we're going into.
Yeah, now we have Restream to post everything. Now what you need is something that combines the chat from all of these into one, because you're probably going pretty crazy right now watching everything.
Well, no one's talking to me except on YouTube. I was trying to encourage it. I mean, so there are a couple of people on Facebook. I don't really use Facebook, so I don't really encourage that community. But Logan was talking to me there. But apart from that, a couple of messages on D Live, and everyone else is just on YouTube. So, hi, YouTube people. You're still primarily where people watch me. Cool. It's fine. Anyone watching through Bitbacker? I always post the Bitbacker link on my tweet, and I don't know whether people are like, oh God, now I have to click twice to just get to YouTube. I'm like always encouraging people like, just watch it through Bitbacker. I don't know if anyone is. Let me know if you are. So I want to move on. You've got some like smaller news. So Firefox, they just added a browser option which automatically blocks crypto mining scripts. So that's interesting as things evolve. It's like one of their defaults now, when you can choose to block trackers, cookies, like fingerprinters, and now crypto miners is one of the boxes that you can, one of 4 boxes you can check there. So
we'll see how well they do with that, because some of the crypto miners out there, like if you block them, I mean, they're just using basic JavaScript, so you'd end up blocking JavaScript everywhere. So it'll be interesting to see how that war goes. Related to that, I remember reading sometime last year that something like 5% of all Monero has been mined by hackers who snuck Bitcoin miners into pop-ups or banner ads.
That's kind of hilarious. I don't know. I shouldn't laugh at that. That's like hacking people's computer pie. I shouldn't like that, but I don't know. It just kind of amuses me.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, but we'll see how Firefox does with that. They're trying to stay relevant. I think nobody talks about Firefox anymore.
No one talks about them. Well, we talked about them today, so there you go, Firefox. We threw you some crumbs there. But moving on, so Game of Thrones is over, and I failed at doing a recap of the whole show, all of the 8 seasons, which I've started less than 2 weeks before the final episode. So that was never going to happen, because that's like 70 hours worth of footage to recap there. But it just kind of reaffirmed my love of this show, and I don't know what you guys thought of the last episode. Let's not mention the last episode in this, because I don't know if everyone's caught up to date, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone. But one thing I will mention is that one of the actors... Not a worry
for me, don't worry.
Yeah, one of the actors who plays Bronn, so his name is Jerome Flynn, and apparently he is advising a vegan crypto project, which is interesting. He says, Vegan Nation is the basis of an international vegan economy that makes vegan lives simpler, more economical, and better for the earth and the soul of each of us. Vegan Coin will allow many more to become vegans and thereby contribute to the reduction of our ecological footprint. Like, I kind of look at something like that and I'm like, did they just put the word blockchain on top of their project? Because how does Vegan Coin help you become more vegan? Isn't it just a choice about what you eat? So I'm not quite sure about that, but I am pleased that someone like a prominence like Jerome Flynn is entering the world of blockchain, is interesting and is open-minded enough to explore it. That's cool. And also I like vegans. I would say that I try my hardest to be vegan. I'm vegetarian, but I every chance I get, I will choose a vegan option if there is one. So that's cool, but again, just don't understand how it relates to blockchain. But maybe I'm missing something.
I've been eating carnivore for a couple of weeks, so I'm kind of the opposite there. I am not their clientele.
So Uvers is wondering whether vegan coin can be exchanged for beef coin. Yes. I don't know, maybe on one of these decentralized food exchanges or something like that. But yeah, it's cool that someone with such prominence, especially coming off the hype of Game of Thrones in the finale, he's in the press a lot now. He's mentioning blockchain projects. That's kind of cool, even though I don't get the project he's mentioning. I'm not quite
we had
sure.
A few of these in 2017, so maybe we're getting back into this now and people are trying to get in the celebrity ICO phase again.
Okay, wait. So I'm learning a little bit more about this project. It's maybe not as stupid as it seemed. It's more about tracking the supply chain of products. So being vegan is not necessarily just what you eat, it's like what you consume, whether your products are leather, whether there's been cruelty involved in your makeup production, etc., etc. So Vegan Nation, apparently they're aiming to track the origin of foods or products on its platform and authenticate whether they're 100% vegan and cruelty free. That is actually kind of interesting. And you'll see, I mean, this isn't something to be laughed at, because there are some major companies around the world that are delving into like supply chain tracking with blockchain tech. It seems like it is going to be a prominent use case that big corporations are exploring. So this could actually be something interesting. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, supply chain is a useful aspect for blockchain technology. Theoretically, we'll see who manages to actually make use of it. But why there's a token with value on top of that is somewhat unclear. But that's pretty much 99% of the ICOs out there can't really answer the fact of why token other than to make me money. So we'll see what they do with that. But at the same time, I'm all for people trying things. If they can make it in the free market and be productive with their vegan coin, fine. I'll just make a beef coin, work with all my slaughterhouses and butchers around me and get them to accept it.
No, that's terrible. I'm not supporting beef coin. I'm anti-beef coin. I'm going to put so much FUD out on my channel. No one buy beef coin. It's the worst. Thank you so much to Berkozimir, who just followed me on D Live. And now I have 30 followers, so only 170 to go before I can use the platform fully. So I appreciate that. I just want to run through a couple more headlines before we go, because we're running out of time here. So we've talked about Cryptopia before. We've talked about how, the ongoing investigation there, they tried to keep things going. They eventually said, no, we're just going to liquidate. And now the founder says that apparently he has this new exchange, and there's not much information about this new exchange out there, but he's saying that that people should, it's going to be New Zealand's most advanced crypto trading platform. And we'll have to see, like someone who shutters the doors on this one that went bust and had to be liquidated, and then starts a new one saying this is going to be the best thing ever. I don't know. I'm not jumping to get involved right now.
I would question the sanity of anybody who sent him any money right now.
Absolutely. Then we've got the SEC. They apparently sued someone for $26 million. Sorry. $26 million crypto Ponzi scheme operator, meaning that they raised $26 million in funds. First of all, I take a grain of salt with anyone who says like, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, because, I think people throw that word around, but it does seem kind of justified in this case, basically because this person, he created this this investor point system, and they could theoretically convert to Pro currency, which is a digital asset affiliated with this company, and then you get more bonus points the more people you bring into the system, which is kind of like a hallmark of Ponzi schemeness. But the thing that stood out to me, because he apparently raised $26 million through this scheme, but the thing that stood out for me was that he bought a $2.5 million home, he bought a Rolls Royce, and you did all these things, which is fine. Someone makes money from their project, they could spend it whatever they like. But this resulted in him being unable to pay his investors cash commissions or other bonuses. So he promises this bonus system and all this, but apparently can't pay it because he's busy buying this other stuff. So that's what's going on there. The SEC is going after him. I don't know. Have you looked into this at all, Chris?
Not that much, but I mean, sure. It's just the whole scale of the project was, you just get other people to sign up to the network and you make money off of them. I mean, classic pyramid scheme. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw this at one point, pyramid scheme. And that's not the only one out there. It's just they were apparently one of the more successful pyramid scheme ICOs.
Right.
And who buys a Rolls Royce anymore?
Well, Rolls Royces are nice. Have a nice roller, drive around. I wouldn't turn one down. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's crypto. You buy Lambos.
Lambo or Teslas, apparently. Everyone in San Francisco has a Tesla. It's like you roll up to traffic lights and you're in a beat up hire car, and there are 15 Teslas. I was like, I am out of my league. So that's where we are now. So last thing, actually a couple more quick things. Bitfinex, they're saying that the judge should dismiss the New York Attorney General's case. Because they say that they had no New York customers. I think that is a really legitimate concern. Why is the New York Attorney General going after Bitfinex when they apparently didn't have any New York customers? That just seems like this egregious overreach. You say what you want about Bitfinex and whatever's going on there, But doesn't that seem ridiculous?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that completely. But it's, again, I question the timing of the filing of the suit. I question a lot of stuff from the New York side of things. And a judge has granted a partial stay from the New York Attorney General's request for documents pending a July 29th hearing. This is going to last a while, in case we're wondering. We're going to be talking about this well into next year, I'm sure. But yeah, but also at the same time, yeah, of course, they're going to argue that they should throw out the case because that's what lawyers in these sorts of cases do. It's not, it's just what happens. You don't want them to have a right to do it, and then you argue the next step on and on and on. But
Yeah.
yes, apparently have to wait for until July 29th for the hearing for the motion to dismiss. Ugh.
So we'll have to see what happens there. Second last thing, so Binance CEO CZ is suing VC giant Sequoia for reputational damages. So apparently Sequoia, they went after, Binance went after CZ and said, listen, we had an exclusive agreement. For Series A funding, you were only allowed to talk to us, and apparently they were talking to someone else, and so they were talking to IDG Capital, and so then Sequoia, they obtained an injunction order in an ex parte or unilateral procedure without notifying Zhao, and so they're claiming against him without any discussion to Binance, which seems weird, and to kind of jump the shark, is that an expression, a little bit. What actually happened was they were talking with them about Series B funding. So they didn't break any agreement, and seeing as the judge threw out the case from Sequoia, CZ is now going after Sequoia and saying, you damaged our reputation. You said we were in breach of contract. We were not in breach of contract. And so he hasn't put a number on what he wants or what those damages are, but he says, listen, I want an investigation into how the reputation suffered and what losses we had, and then we'll put that number on afterwards. So that's a thing that's going on. And anything to mention about that before I just mention the last article, Chris? Nothing special. It's just the more and more money that comes into the space, the more suits like this we're going to see. Absolutely. I mean, we still got that suit going on with Mt. Gox, and the lawsuit where it's holding up all of the processing for the claimants. It's all crazy, but no news to report there. So I'll save that for another week when we have an update. But the final thing is, so Galaxy Digital sells its stake in EOS blockchain maker Block One. So Michael Novogratz, he sold for $71.2 million his shares in Block One, which is interesting that he's selling his shares there. It didn't say anything about him selling his tokens, and I do, my understanding is that he has a lot of them. So I'm wondering what to think about this. It doesn't seem like it's a crisis in confidence of everything, but maybe he's hedging something there. Have you looked into this at all, Chris? I read this article, looked into it a little bit. It seems just pretty standard process that they're closing the position. They're still going to work with them on other EOS related things. And they also had a joint venture for the EOS IO ecosystem fund and so on. So it doesn't seem like it's a systemic issue. It's just a adjustment of the business relationship on this one little small area. Absolutely. It seems that they're just rebalancing the portfolio a little bit, which happens all the time. So I don't think people should be releasing too much FUD about this. And I think, their portfolios, they put a huge amount of money into this, and they're just readjusting now that there are other projects to consider as well. EOS was really a trailblazer in the ICO space, in the crypto space, and there wasn't much out there at the time. So now that the space has evolved, that just seems like it's a rebalancing. And that is everything that we have time to cover today. So thank you, Chris, for being here. It's always delightful spending a Friday afternoon with you. Well, thank you very much, Naomi. It always is a good end cap to my week. Absolutely. Did you say a good end cap to my week? I'll take it. Whether you said end cap or and cap, I'll take either. Thank you, everyone who has been here. Just to close off, a huge thank you to JR. So he sent me through a super chat, said power chats didn't work, so we'll look into that for you. And as I said, exciting news to happen there, to come there regarding Bitbacker, and I'll be keeping everyone in my Telegram group posted on that. but lots of things to announce there. But JR says, important to have order in society with a manager-like system. However, a person's individuality is most important in respect. Thank you so much for sending that through, JR. I really, really appreciate it. His channel is Exciting World Cryptos, and he's always posting things like letting people know about scams, showing people amazing, beautiful landscapes of where he's building. So go check out his channel and send him some love. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's always wonderful having you guys here and chatting with you across all of the platforms today. Rob Rafferty just joined on Facebook. Hi, Rob, if you're still there. I'm kind of testing out this like stream on everything simultaneously and seeing which platform wins out there. So yeah, as I said, unfortunately Facebook is winning right now. If anyone wants to like engage on any other platforms, I'll totally respond on all those, but I guess it's not as fun when there aren't as many people in the chat room. So maybe next time we can do like a coordinated, let's all try out this or something like that. That could be fun. But go and have a wonderful weekend. It's apparently Memorial Day weekend. Is that a thing?
Yes, that's a thing. So most people are off of school and or work come Monday.
Wow, so I won't be because I generally work weekends and holidays, whatever, because it's just a thing. But to anyone who has the privilege of not having to work on Monday, you go and have a stellar day and check the Bitcoin charts and whatever else you do with your time when you're not working. That's how I spend my time. It's like, oh God. All right. I always have trouble shutting these things off because I just want to chat for forever. So I love all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Real Health News. I appreciate that. Superfin guy. It's all right, you were late, but luckily it's recorded on many platforms, so you can watch that. Jason says that JR should be on my show. Jason, I thought you and JR were doing like a partnership and you were going to send me a video and then I'd put that on. Happy to, you guys do that. You send that to me. I'm sure everyone would love to see you and JR. So let's do that. Thank you, everyone. All right, definitely going. I've rambled for too much. Love you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Memorial Day.
Barbecue some meat.
Awesome vegan